You're listening to The Unstoppables, where each week we show you how to overcome obstacles and transform the sting of failure into the reward of growth. And now, here's your host, best-selling author, keynote speaker, and CEO, Bill Wooditch.
You are tuned in to The Unstoppables, where we pick the brains, examine the hearts, the feelings of those who are successful, those who have triumphed over adversity, those who have dealt with failure and dispatched it, those who have kicked the big F, fear, to the curb, that have moved through it to create a difference in their life and the lives of others they love. Today's special guest is William Arntz. He's the author of How to Suffer in 10 Easy Steps. He's the founder of Captured Light, a creative works company, including films, books, theater, and experiential retreats. Will began his professional career as a research laser physicist, working on Star Wars high-energy lasers. He wrote the software system AutoSys, an automated job control system currently in use by most Fortune 500 companies. Rare air indeed. After selling that company, he used the proceeds to create, produce, and direct the film, What the Bleep Do We Know? It's an exploration of spirituality, quantum physics, neurology, and outrageous possibilities. Welcome to the show, Will.
Well, thank you. Good to be here.
Give us a little background. Let's start at 30,000 feet. You can bring us down into a little deeper dive, but give us a little bit about your beginnings, where you grew up and what you did from there to start in this multifaceted, to say the least, career.
Well, I grew up in a little farm town outside of Lancaster, Pennsylvania called Millersville. And it was a little farm town of about, 4,000 people. There was a college there, Millersville State College. And, nothing really extraordinary there, a little farm town. But what was extraordinary is I had two friends. And what we did to do something about the boredom was we started, back in 7th grade, my friend got a tape recorder. We started doing our own little radio shows. And pretty soon, I grabbed Dad's 8mm camera and we were making films. That's what we did for fun all through college. And really, my friends one of them ended up going to Yale, the other to Penn. They were intellectuals and they were really, they were trying to read Nietzsche and all this kind of stuff in high school. So I got exposed to stuff that probably no one else in the farm town ever did, and had quite a wonderful childhood. It was pretty idyllic. So that started my whole thing about films, because I really wanted to do it, but I also loved science and math, so I ended up going to college at Penn State doing that. So those were really the two careers. There was a scientific one and an artistic one, and over time I ended up weaving both of them together. So that's the 30,000 foot view.
I know in your book, How to Suffer, you talk about philosophers and dualism. And to me, the brain that has both lobes in that work in that way, I'm extremely envious, because I only have the creative part at best. But to have both, it's a force of nature. I think that's what you are. Let's start with Nietzsche. You write in your book, to live is to suffer. This is Nietzsche. To survive is to find meaning in the suffering. What do you mean by that?
Well, the meaning in the suffering, I'll be a little more practical than our German philosopher, is that I found that when you're suffering, or when people suffer, the meaning you attach to it really depends on how you process it. So for instance, if you think the suffering is just bad luck, or it's a nasty universe, or there's no rhyme or reason to anything, then you just kind of suffer. But the people who have the opinion that, okay, the suffering, there's more often than not a reason for it, there's something for me to learn, I can grow and evolve from it. When you have that attitude, you end up moving through it much, much easier. So the meaning you're finding in it, you got to find the meaning though. And the thing is, when you're suffering, part of the joke about the book, How to Suffer in 10 Easy Steps, there's not 10 easy steps. Come on. You have to find the meaning in the suffering. You have to go inside. You have to look at yourself and look at what happened and dive deep to really figure out what the meaning is. And that's the journey.
One of my favorite books that I buy for people and send to them is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And it's a derivative of what Nietzsche was speaking of. You've got to find the meaning in the suffering, in the despair, and the possibility of tomorrow, which for some people they just shut down because I think is it Buddhist, that's the attachment is the root of suffering, correct?
Yep. That's what they say.
It was a lucky guess on that one. Tell us about the 800-pound gorilla you write about in the room. Is it an 800-pound gorilla in the room? What is it?
The 800-pound gorilla is suffering. And the reason I call it the 800-pound gorilla is people, you and I are talking about it now, and that's a little odd, but most people, you say, hey, Bill, how are you doing? Oh, I'm fine. What about you? Hey, I can't complain. And then you go on. So, when was the last time you say, how are you doing? And someone said, well, I'm suffering. I'm suffering right now. And not only do you not say it to someone else, you don't say it to yourself. Generally, people, they just go somewhere else, or they turn to entertainment, or turn to alcohol, or they turn to whatever they turn to basically mask it. And the thing with that is, if you don't deal with it in a direct manner, I'm not saying you sit around and focus on your suffering 24 hours a day, but the fact that you're aware of it and you're not basically pushing it out of your awareness, that's really the important thing about that. And so by not acknowledging the gorilla in the room, then the gorilla stays in the room, and then you keep on suffering.
It's almost like another metaphor. It's like a rubber band that just keeps being pulled back more and more taut. So the more you're in denial and delusion of the self or what's happening in the exterior, the more veneer, the more you cover up those faults and deny their existence. Man, when you let go of that rubber band and reality does eventually true up, ouch.
Yeah.
That's right. I always call that owning it. I own my own crap. I own my own stuff. I see it for what it is. I don't deny the existence of something. I don't delude myself into something better. So, that's something that you write about. And you write, recognition is liberation. Can you explain that?
Well, that's a favorite quote of the Tibetan Buddhists. The Buddhists, they did not have the gorilla in the room syndrome. That's Buddha, noble truth, life is suffering. So they're one group that really looks at it directly. And so they say recognition is liberation. And that's really the same thing, that if you don't recognize what's going on, it'll just keep haunting you. And that's why, as you said, we all got to do the deep dive in ourselves to find out what's holding us back, or what's making us miserable, or what's causing us to hurt others, or whatever shenanigans we get into.
Toughest thing to do. A French philosopher said, man's biggest fear is to be alone in a room with his thoughts. Biggest fear is to look inside with that, whatever introspection is, and look inside and see as clear as you can, what is it that's really happening inside.
So I'm gonna jump in here for a second, Bill. You said the quote was, the man's biggest fear is to be alone in a room. And guess what the world is more or less doing right now? You can see right now the effect worldwide of what's happening with being alone in a room. Maybe it's alone with your family in a room, but basically that sense that you can't just run out there and distract yourself or whatever. The whole world right now is going through an initiation, essentially. The whole world has been put on retreat, and basically they have to come to grips with it. And you can see what's happening in the world. Politics are going crazy. There's protests everywhere on both sides. People are just going nuts. The Karens are taking over the world. So there you have it.
That was well said. Extremely well said. We are sequestered, and we feel alone and disconnected. And as humans, as beings, as feeling beings, we need to be connected, and we're disconnected. You're right.
Yeah.
Let me ask you about the steps of sufferings. Take me through the steps of suffering, so people can recognize. Okay, this is what I'm doing. These are the steps.
Well, let's see. I don't. I should have a book here when I do these interviews. The ones that really stick with me. One of the easiest, and let me just step back for a second. this whole idea of the 10 easy steps to suffering, it started off as a satire of self-help books that, promise you the world, how to be a billionaire in 5 easy steps. Oh, come on, give me a break. And they,
too many. There's too many, and there's only like 3.
yeah. Oh, there you go. See, you should write a book. There you go. And then you can become the billionaire on your book, and the people who buy it will help you. There you go. But anyway, so it started off as a satire of self-help books. But I figure I'm the only one that really delivers on the promise because they are easy steps. Why? Because everyone suffers and no one wants to. So it must be pretty easy to do. Yeah. So I came up with this whole thing as a joke because I have friends who write self-help books. And I figured I'd write this satire, send it to them. We'd all have a good laugh and be done with it. But I started writing it and I just kept writing. So the idea, obviously, if these are the easy steps to suffering, then you just do the opposite. It's in one of those inverse things. So like one of them is play the blame game. So, if you're suffering and all you do is you blame your boss, you blame your partner, if there's no one else, blame God. If you're an atheist, just blame fate. Blame the universe. There's always someone to blame, something to blame if you really want to. So that's one of the easy steps, because when you're blaming, you're not acknowledging what's really going on. You're just projecting it all out there.
It's pretty easy to relinquish personal accountability, isn't it?
Oh yeah. Then it's always someone else's fault and that sort of thing. So that's one of the easy steps. Another easy step is do nothing. If you're suffering about something, and if you actually do nothing, you're just going to sit and wallow in it. And part of doing something may be just acknowledging it and looking into it. There's various things you can do, but that's another one of the easy steps.
Well, if you do nothing, you can't be blamed for something going wrong. Not acknowledging that no choice is a choice. So some people do that. It's a default choice for them, is to do nothing. We talked about COVID. Let me loop back into COVID, because you seem like a very positive thinker and a very positive spirit. You got a certain type of spirituality that comes through in your books, and it's very positive. Well, what are some of the steps we can do today? How can COVID-19, do you think, change some people for the better? How can this crucible, how can we come through here, through this adversity, and be better?
Well, I talk in the book a little about this, but my wife, who's a teacher, talks about this all the time, and that's getting in touch with our core values. Now, in the book, I talk about we have, our belief system. What's our worldview? What are the things we fundamentally believe in? And so often, everyone strays from them. So a core value is something like, what is really important to me? What do I at the core value the most? And what's happened in my mind in society is we have gotten away from our core values. And there was a thing with Governor Cuomo about a month ago I watched. And he was giving his thing, and he stopped and he said, you got to look for silver linings in all this. And I had one this morning. I was, I had breakfast and I was sitting there next to my daughter, and we ended up talking. We talked over the kitchen table for 3 hours. I can't remember the last time I did that. And, oh my God, it was such a great talk. And we just know each other so much better now. And I can already tell that our relationship has changed. And so for him, that was a core value that he rediscovered, was connecting with your kids. And in our society now, with everyone running after the bigger, better, whatever, both parents working, this whole concept of a family and really spending time with your kids, or if you're kids, spending time with your parents and really getting to know them in a deeper way has sort of gone out the window. Everyone, you go to a restaurant, you see a family sitting there and everyone picks up their cell phone. That's, come on. So a core value would be saying, what is really important? Because if you have one core value, but you're living another life, you're going to be miserable. So what I've seen happening is, and this is part of the reason why people go on retreats, right? You get away from the world to basically all the busyness coming at us, and the world right now is set up to just cover us with busyness over and over and over, and grab our mind and do this and buy this and watch this, all this to retreat. The whole world's been put on retreat so we can examine what really is important to us, what really makes us tick. And so that's really, in my mind, the big silver lining to all this. And maybe the granite countertop on top of the kitchen cabinets isn't worth working a second job over. So that's my take.
Great take on that. And I will say it's like the distractions are the opiate, so we don't have to look in the mirror and face that, who we are. And sometimes that's, I guess, bringing in some divorce attorneys I hear in this crisis, because now we have to look at our partner and think, who are you? I don't know you, because we're so busy immersed in our own distractions, ones we create and ones we follow. Right off the cliff. So you kind of alluded to technology. Tell me about techno suffering.
Techno suffering. Yeah, you can even, look it up on the internet, which is kind of ironic because that's where a lot of the techno suffering come from. But techno suffering is just the fact we've created all this technology to more or less make our lives better, make us, better. Yeah, happier. Oh, things are better. I can turn on all the lights in my house with one button with now I have a smart house. Of course, what happens is then the power goes out and then it comes back on and you have to now reboot the house, but it won't reboot because one of the items in it had an automatic upgrade from the internet, and now it's not compatible with the rest of the things. So now you have to go upgrade the whole house, but guess what? You can't do it because the smart thing has turned off the power to the house. So you can't, so et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The complex technology just is one thing after another. Oh, I have to upgrade the OS. Oh, I upgraded the OS. It crashed partway through. Oh my God, now I can't even get to my phone and I'm late for an appointment and I don't know how to read a map anymore, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or the classic one is there's a website you use all the time, you go to it, you know where everything is, and then the nerds get turned loose and they update the interface. You can't find anything. It used to, it would be like you have a car and you've been driving this car and you go in one day and the steering wheel's on the other side, the brake pedal and the accelerator have been switched. The radio is now sitting in a control panel in the back seat. I mean, that's what changing an interface does, and it just drives us all crazy. So that's techno suffering. And the irony is this stuff is supposed to make our life better, and yet we've become slaves to it.
You just brought me to a question something I just thought of as you were speaking. What's your take on artificial intelligence as something that's going to master us, or are we going to be able to master artificial intelligence?
Well, yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's not intrinsically bad. It's not intrinsically good. It's like all science. It's just how is it going to be used? But that's where you need something just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. Mm. And, there are things that it can be useful for. I mean, I spent 15, 20 years programming computers. So, I don't have a thing that I actually hate them. I enjoy them quite a bit. But, some of the stuff that they do, it's really like I heard there's this thing now where they have these little scanners in supermarkets. And what they do is as you're walking through the store, somehow they're able to figure out by triangulation where you are in the store. And if you go up and you look at the yogurt things, it knows from your buying patterns that you generally like the chocolate yogurt best. And then it looks it up and says, oh, there's a special. And so your phone beeps and says special on chocolate yogurt today. I mean, this sort of stuff of Big Brother, it's a real thing. So, and that's all artificial intelligence doing that. So, in that sense, it's like, as we keep doing that more and more, I mean, there are certain studies now that's saying that having all this quote unquote artificial intelligence is making us dumber. There's a whole thing in the brain about being able to read a map and get somewhere. And so,
It's about plasticity. And the thing and neuroplasticity in the prefrontal cortex, and you talked about this before about saying to someone, how do you feel? How do you feel? It's kind of a rote, or how are you today? It's just a rote question. We don't really expect to hear the answer. We expect the answer to be good. So for me, playing the card of cognitive dissonance, I'll say terrible, just to see if they're listening. Half will say, well, good, because they're on rote. And the other half will say, really, what's wrong? Now, I'm not going to open up to anybody. I'm just trying to do a little pilot test there. But Amazon tricks me on all that stuff. They go, oh, you know, this is something you might like, something you might like. And they're just feeding me AI. To your point about being dumber, I could concur 100%. And I am raging against that. I am a voracious reader. I've spent more time reading now. One of my books before the pandemic was Fahrenheit 451. Wow, that was prescient. Where people just burnt books, couldn't congregate in groups, and got everything off a box. I don't know where we're heading, but I'm going to keep reading my books. Ain't nobody getting my books. And I know in Pennsylvania, they ain't not getting your guns either. So it's just, suffering, as you say, is a habit. And I know people who like to wallow in the shit. I can say that's my show. I know people who love the victimology, I call it, around the water cooler at work. I got it. Okay. But tell me why it's a habit.
well, it's a habit because anything and everything can become a habit. And you know, part of what a habit is, we'll go neurology here and brain neurology a little bit. You know, a habit is really any neural pattern in the brain that you go to over and over, and it's like a road. The more you go through it, the easier it is, and the more worn down it gets, and the more you're to go there. So if you tend to play the victim role a lot, that pattern in the brain gets happening over and over. But it's not just the brain. Because of that, any emotion generates a certain amount of peptides. And what the BLEEP, we talked about the molecules of emotion, which are the peptides. And so their peptides are released. And so there's a certain emotional hit you get off of playing the victim role. And so not just the hit of people giving you sympathy, but in just with your own physiology, there's a way in which you get a rush from getting up there and complaining once more. So that over and over is a habit.
Is that like hijacked serotonin in some strange way? Is that the feel good that we get? Dopamine, you know? It's
Well,
hijacking it?
those are some of them, but then there's other peptides. There's a whole ton of them. And it's like when the peptides dock to the cells, then, you know, it sets off a chemical chain, also sets off some electrical stuff goes on, and it's like, whoa, you get a little rush. So yeah, boom, boom.
That's fascinating. That explains a lot of people to me.
So,
I don't want to put people in a box, but it explains a lot.
So yeah, so in my chapter on Buddha, I called that chapter "Buddha Kicks the Habit," and I just came up with the title because you know it's kind of my sense of humor. And then I'm like, oh my God, that's true. So much of it is a habit, and when you think about it, I mean, when you were 3 years old and you didn't get what you wanted, you know what? You cry, you get upset, and you know you suffered because your mom took away your favorite toy. So that pattern is still within us. It's something that, you know, we get smarter, we become mature, we more or less grow out of it, but the patterns are still there. The habits are still there, and they get so, as we get older, we get more subtle about them, and, you know, they change them, and we put like lots of words on top of them. But in some respects, you know, right now, again, back to COVID, people are like the 3-year-old kid who got their favorite toy taken away from them.
Yeah. You know, we are. We expect immediate gratification, and if we can't have that, and we don't follow the habits, the things that we used to do to congregate and do what we do, we feel like something's been taken from us.
Yeah, and then people get angry, and then, you know, and it's kind of funny, this stuff about the mask, people wearing masks now, which somehow got turned into a political thing.
I think it's turned into a political thing.
Isn't that amazing? That's something.
It's a euphemism for the word I could pick, but go ahead.
Well, I'm just waiting for 2 + 2 = 4 to become political.
Why doesn't it equal? It should equal 4.5, right? Yeah, it's yeah. Totally. You use the word inverse. Everything that we know is turned inside out. It is the opposite. It's inverse. Everything we've ever been taught, we've learned. How do you burn history? Just watch. Let me ask you this question about core values. Watch, keep watching. Let me ask you about core values. And this is, I'm gonna go a little deeper into you, Will. Core values to me are the fundamentals, the foundation of our character, our being, how we express ourselves, how we think, and then what we do with that thought, word, deed. So what are your core values?
Well, one of them is the golden rule. Do unto others, you would have them do unto you. I mean, that one is such a, boy, you get in a situation and you just stick yourself in the other person's shoes. And you say, well, how would I like to be treated like this? So that's really a core value for me. And that really does guide how I interact and do things in the world. So, that's one thing. Another core value is doing things that help and inspire people. For some reason, I just really like, that's why I write books and do movies and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm working on a new movie now, and the reason I'm really driven to do it is because there's, the world is so much in topsy-turvy, and the inverse, as you say, and I think this movie could help. So, so that's another core value of mine. The last one has to do with relationships. And a little more history, I never got married until I was 62. That was the first time I got married. And, I had girlfriends, relationships, but I finally got married, and, a much deeper relationship. And really, and my wife has said, man, you are so disconnected. You don't know how to connect to people because you live in your head. And, she was more or less right all the time. So, I've had to really, that's sort of a new one for me, because these core values, it's not like you get your core values and you just go on. That's evolution. You learn and you realize, oh, I've been doing this, but really this is more of who I am. And that's one of the ways you discover what you're really made of.
Speaking of who you are, and most important, where we can find you, direct us to where we can find some of your fascinating stuff. And I mean, I'm going to go back into a deeper dive on what the BLEEP, but tell us where we can find you.
Well, my website is capturedlight.biz, B-I-Z. If you can't remember that and you want to just see about the book, the URL I got for that is howtosuffer.me. Yeah, I know. I couldn't believe I got that, but I did. Howtosuffer.me. But if you go to capturedlight.biz, then there's bio there, and there's links to what the BLEEP and other books and all the goodies are there.
You struck me as someone who's extremely, and I'm going to use the adverb judiciously, aspirational. It's next level. Raise the bar. Next level. So the next bar is the movie, correct?
Yeah.
You're raising that one.
Well, that one, it's kind of a funny story on that one. It's a movie I made 10 years ago. And I made it with a friend of mine who's an African-American down in the South LA. And we made this movie. It was called Ghetto Physics. And we released it. And, well, the original title was, get this one, Will the Real Pimps and Hoes Please Stand Up? So
try that today. See if that gets picked up by a major company.
Well, we backed away from that because a lot of people, especially women, just, the word hoe is just, it's tough for them.
Didn't work?
Yeah, it didn't work. So we changed it to Ghetto Physics. But I woke up about 2 months ago and I just said, oh my God, I got it. There was so much weirdness going on in the world right now. It's like, I got to do something about it. And this was even before the Black Lives Matter thing exploded. And I said, if I took that film, because there's a lot of historical elements in the film, so it's not really dated. If I just updated that and did a few more interviews, we could re-release this thing. So I called up E-Ray, my collaborator in this, and said, E-Ray, I. So I went back, re-edited it, and so now we're running around interviewing people and basically getting this thing ready to hopefully get out in about a month and a half. And it really talks about, the name of the movie now is called The Game. And that's something that in African American culture, they're always talking about the game. What are the games playing? The game, the game. And as KRS-One says in the film, the game don't change, only the players do. That's one of his lines he says a lot. And so and we have Cornel West is in it. And so really it's looking at the games that are coming at us. There's the advertising game. There's the political game. There's the sexual game. There's all these games. And the whole thing about a game is if you don't see the game that's being played, you get trapped in it. You're stuck in it.
You get played.
You get played in the game. So if you're not aware, you just get played. And so this is really trying to raise people awarenesses about, I mean, you can't get out of the games because, they're everywhere, but to become aware of it and then choose how you're going to fit into the game and maybe change the rules a little bit to your advantage. So that's the film I'm working on now.
I have a shirt, The Game of Life. I wear it every time I fly, and I fly often. Let me ask you this about awareness. Does awareness bring you, and I think you have a heightened level of awareness, does it bring you to a certain point of loneliness, maybe despair, to say, man, I'm getting this stuff, but no one else is?
It sometimes is a little frustrating, but generally, I mean, my group of people that I hang out with, everyone kind of, gets it. It's not like, maybe if you're a Buddha, you may feel that a little bit, that no one really gets it like you do. But I never really have that feeling. I mean, there's certain things I do and certain things I don't. So
I run the risk of being extremely solipsistic when I say that, thinking that the axis of the world is stuck up my derriere and that no one else gets me, and that's my own, private prison. But at a certain point, you just get life at a certain level and understand that what's important and what's not, and what's urgent and what's not. And you mentioned this even with Cuomo, who's, I'm not a fan, but what he said about connecting with his daughter is important. Connecting with people is important. It's the essence of being human. Let me ask you this question. And by any definition, by any stretch, societal, measuring what you've done, man, that is like the epitome of success. But how do you define success in your own terms?
Well, it's funny. I actually start the suffering book off talking about that you always think if you get everything you want and you achieve all your goals, that your life is going to be wonderful and you're going to be happy. And that's illusion number one to pop. It's just not true. So you do all that. So, you get to what you think is the mountaintop and you realize, oh, now I'm here, but I'm still me. So, for me, it's just, I always go for what inspires me, and I can happily sit on a mountaintop and watch the clouds go by for a year. That's fine by me, because if I'm not really inspired, then I just don't care. But just once I get inspired, like when I did What the Bleep, or this movie I'm working on now, I'm really inspired. So it's like, oh, that's all I want to do. So and who knows why the muse speaks when the muse speaks, right?
Yeah, and you can't force it. It's inspiration is a pull, it's a fire, and motivation is a push, and it's got a time frame on it or a goal line on it. But for me, inspiration is the fire. But It's the muse, and when the muse speaks, you best obey. Just don't follow it into the rocks. It's not that type of muse. All right, we don't want to do that. Let me ask you about failure. What do you consider your biggest failure? What did you take away and learn from it?
My biggest failure. Well, as far as creatively, it's kind of funny. My biggest failure was that movie Ghetto Physics that now I'm resurrecting. My good friend that I grew up with, he called it my sophomore slump. Which is typical. Like in a rock and roll band, they say, it takes 10 years to make your first album and 5 months to make the next one. So there's often the second one, there's a soft, you spend all this time doing it in the second one because you got some success. So he called it the sophomore slump. So I'm trying to see if I can make it my junior victory. That's not why I'm doing it, but that was, creatively, that was the That was the big one. What's the personal one? You know, I'm still lousy at meditating. I mean, I've been working at it for what, 40 years now, 50 years now. It's scary how long. And I'm still not very good at it. So I would say on my list of things that I wouldn't say I've failed, but let's say I've not succeeded dramatically.
Just a work in process.
It's a work in progress.
You meditate every day?
Most days. Yeah, most days.
How long?
Well, when I'm sitting formally, it's like 45 minutes. But a lot of my meditation now is I get up and I have a cup of tea and I sit somewhere and I stare off into the distance, sometimes for as much as an hour. And I slowly drink my cup of tea and I just observe. So in meditation, I mean, they say there's the higher meditation and lower meditation. Higher is when you formally sit and really work on it. But lower meditation is where you're just being aware as much as you can of yourself and what's going internally and externally, just with a very non-judgmental awareness of what is. So that's kind of my big meditation. Because when I sit formally, I'm still waiting for that magic moment when the mind just gives up the ghost and shuts up.
Two things. I knew you would answer failure that way because the great guests on the show, and I've had Navy SEALs on, I've had top CEOs of Fortune 500 companies on, they have a hard time with failure. They just think it's just part of a process of the bargain that success demands. And it's just setback is not really a failure. They really can't get a failure in their head. It's not so final, It's like Churchillian that, success is going from failure to failure without losing enthusiasm. So they just really don't get it, Yeah. I knew you'd go that way. I just had a feeling. I have a good feeling about you on a lot of things I'm going to talk to you about off the air. But if you could write one paragraph, as we wrap this, if you could write one paragraph for others to learn from, that you are about sharing, you are about legacy because you've created a good one, a great one. And you're about sharing with people. What would that paragraph look like that you would leave behind?
Leave behind like?
If you're gone, you want other people to learn from your lessons, your triumphs, your successes, failures, everything.
Well, whatever it is, it would have to be funny, first off. Because one of my greatest joys in life is making people laugh, and you just chuckled at that. So, see, it's working already. So it would have to be funny. It would have to be amusing. But I don't quite know what that would be. What's the one paragraph? I mean, I can think of all the serious, inspirational stuff. But if I could just write one paragraph and make people laugh, I would go with that. It drives my wife crazy because in social situations, she knows I'll always go for the laugh. And often, of course, to make people laugh, you say something taboo. And then they laugh because it's taboo. And so humor has a lot of that in it. So I'm not exactly sure what it would be, that one paragraph, but I sure hope it's funny.
I am the king of self-deprecating humor. I really don't take too much too serious, including myself. So I'll say a lot of stuff, but I really don't. I just try to get a rise or maybe take people off the axis of what they think they believe, so they open their mind. But it's just where I go with it. You've been fantastic. One more time, where can people find you? Because I want them to buy your books. I want them to look and examine what you have to say because it's important, especially today.
Well, if you go to Captured Light, it's spelled out CAPTUREDLIGHT .biz, That's the company that sort of does everything. But if you just want to learn about suffering, stop suffering, or suffer more, your choice, it's up to you. You can go to howtosuffer.me and have at it.
Happiness, in my opinion, comes when we lose the if and the when, the expectation that I'll be happy if and I'll be happy when. Many people have amassed a great deal of money, of things, and the if and when never really satisfied them.
Yep, that's one of the big illusions. And it's something that, something I realized with working on this film, The Game, talk a lot about corporations and capitalism. And the thing I realize is capitalism needs materialism to survive.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, I mean, that's kind of obvious when you say it, but what that means is that these corporations and advertising, they are spending all of their time getting you to be a consumer,
Yeah.
driving you to that over and over. And you have to, this onslaught is coming at you from very sophisticated psychologists and marketing people just to get you to get that thing of the if and the when. Oh, if you get that new car, wow, you'll be so much better than your neighbor, and that'll make you feel great. So, there's all of that going on all the time, that if and when. It's driving this society, it's driving this world. And that's one of the things I got to tell you. I just, I'm looking forward to the human race getting over that one.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Good. I'll call you when that happens.
Yeah.
You've been listening to The Unstoppables. Today's special guest was Will Arntz, the author of How to Suffer in 10 Easy Steps, the founder of Captured Light, Creative Works Company, and the director of a film called What the Bleep Do We Know? He's been fantastic. You can find this episode and others on Apple, Stitcher, iTunes, iHeartRadio. This is Bill Woodich, The Unstoppables. Until next time, be safe, wash your hands, and go inside, be introspective, do what Will says, and just try to be still. Try not to judge.
You've been listening to The Unstoppables. If you like today's episode, please consider subscribing. We have a new episode every Thursday. Please help spread the word of the show by leaving us a positive review on iTunes or Stitcher. Those 5-star reviews really help out the show. You can subscribe to The Unstoppables on iTunes, Spotify, or Stitcher to stay up to date on the latest episodes. Thanks again for listening. Always forward.